welcome to Mindful Lunch. Folks, we still have some other people coming in. We're going to have the Zoom room populating as we go in. We'll welcome those persons as we go along. I just want to take a moment to introduce myself. I'm Patlee. I'm the lead facilitator and owner of Ryu Mindfulness Collective. And just a little bit about Ryu Mindfulness. We support professionals and caregivers, particularly those who are in emotionally demanding roles. And we provide them with mindfulness, conflict transformation, narrative, and storytelling learning and practice. I talk about this being for caregivers and professionals, but this is really for anyone that's on a healing journey. We heal as professionals and we heal as individuals in our own spaces and in our community. And so I'm really happy that you're able to join us today for this lunchtime webinar where we're talking about the topic of going deeper when it comes to understanding and really practicing self-awareness. So I want to introduce a couple people to you that are helping me with things. First of all, there's SJ who works behind the scenes. SJ, if you can maybe unmute, give us a wave so people know that you're there. She's letting persons into the waiting room, and she's also going to be posting information for us in the chat from time to time. So thank you so much for being here and for doing that for us, SJ. And then I want to quickly introduce you to our guest speaker, Tamara Kroeker. You're gonna learn a little bit more about Tamara in a moment, but I just want to give her a little bit of a nod there. And so she'll give us a wave.
Nice to see all of you. Looking forward to the discussion.
Perfect. Thank you, Tam. Thank you so much for being here. And then I just want to acknowledge everyone. Really just give a quick shout out to all of you who took some time out for having, I call this the mindful lunch hour. You're in your different capacities as leaders, caregivers, educators, individuals, parents, what have you. Everybody has a role, everybody has multiple roles that they're playing. But right now, we're taking a moment to invest in the role of just self and just taking a moment to have lunch, do a little bit of lunchtime learning. Even if you're not having lunch or you're just listening in while you're at office, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. A couple of quick housekeeping points as we get rolling. Just a reminder that that this session is being recorded and that we're going to share the video afterwards along with the speaker resources. So pretty much anything that's posted in the chat, you're going to get an email with that information as well as any attachments that we want to put with it. And I also want to just let you know that you can engage with us through the chat, through reactions, through question and answers. You can unmute and come forward if you'd like to. When we edit the video that we'll send out, we actually will remove the audience conversation as much as possible. So what we'll actually show in the video is myself and the guest speaker Tamara in conversation. So at any point in time, if you have a question or you have something that you want to say, you can post it in the chat. That's going to be monitored by SJ, or you can raise a digital hand and unmute yourself and come on forward at the right time. So let's get into it. So we settle into our seat. We're coming out of, whatever was that last meeting, that last errand, that last thing that we were doing before we settled in to listen to this discussion. And I'm going to invite you into a really simple, what I call an arrival practice. And with this practice, the invitation, and it's only an invitation. If it doesn't serve you, feel free to not do it. I'm just going to invite you to feel yourself becoming grounded by allowing your weight to sink into the chair that you're sitting on, feeling your feet flat against the floor, and just taking a moment to remember that you're breathing. Just bringing that into your memory, breathing. Not going to change the breath or manipulate it in any way. Breathing in through your nose and out through your nose. You can even close your eyes if that's available to you. Just taking a moment to arrive in stillness. Then I invite you to listen as you breathe to these few words that are called the sentences of solace. I am here now, and I am safe. I know who I am. I know where I am. I know this ground, the ground upon which I stand. Right now, I have nothing to do, nothing to achieve, and nowhere to go. I have arrived already. I am here now, surrounded by love. I have arrived already. I am home. I am in my body. I am in my body. I am home in the world, and I can rest now. And when you're ready, opening your eyes if you've had them closed. Remembering that you are here now. Putting a smile on that face if that's available to you. Welcome in, everyone. Welcome. Let's start with a quick icebreaker question. And I'm just going to invite SJ to put that in the chat. Oh, she has done that. Wonderful. What's one word you'd use to describe how you're showing up today? What's one word that you'd use to describe how you're showing up today? And you can just put that in the chat. It can be one word or several words. Whatever is available to you, just throw that in the chat. Oh, we've got curious, rushed. Hopefully you will ease that sense of rushed in the next few minutes of our sitting. We've got excited, wonderful, hopeful. I'm feeling hopeful too. Thank you for that. I'm feeling really hopeful today as well. Wholehearted, wonderful. Wholeheartedly, showing up wholeheartedly. Great, fantastic. Right, keep putting those thoughts in the chat. Like, how are you showing up today? How are you showing up today? And it's really nice that we can have some honesty with that, right? Coming out of one thing into a lunchtime thing, rushed is definitely going to be part of that. But hopeful and wholehearted and curious is also really nice words. Made it here. Yay, made it. I love that one, Joy. Thank you. So here's another question that I'll put in the chat. What's the first thing that comes to mind when you hear the word self-awareness? I'm curious about that. What's the first thing that comes to mind when you hear the word self-awareness? And try not to embellish this. Like, we don't necessarily need to get, put anything that we've heard in there. It's like, what comes to your mind when you think about self-awareness? Wonderful. We've got insight. Yeah. Honesty. Impossible. Oh, I love that one. Me. Aware. Lovely. Lovely, lovely, lovely. So, it's really interesting because self-awareness is a critical skill for leadership, decision-making, communication. And I've been talking with so many people of late. And one of the things that's often brought up is that a lot of us still avoid really diving into self-awareness, a lot of the time due to fear of self-reflection. There's the emotional avoidance. or simply sometimes it's just a lack of time. We don't have the time to engage in that kind of self-reflection and bringing ourselves back into that sense of awareness. And so when I think about self-awareness and the connection to mindfulness and mindful awareness, um, one thing that comes to mind is this poem from Martha Elliott called "Your History is in Your Body." I don't know if if anyone else is familiar with that, but I'll read the poem here and I'll share it. I'll share it in the resources uh, afterwards. But the poem goes, "Your history is here in your body. Your body is your storehouse of learnings, feelings, thoughts, and experiences, only waiting to be invited to reveal your treasures to yourself. Help yourself. As you let the learning emerge and take shape, you can appreciate the wisdom of the body. You can appreciate the wisdom of the body. Each cell alive with spirit, emotion, and intelligence, ready to help you at any moment, always with you and for you." So for me, self-awareness is developing a friendly and curious orientation. See, that was one of the words in the chat. Curious orientation to how your body and your mind work, which means going beyond the basics of self-awareness to deepening your understanding of yourself and the people who you live and work with. So this is where Tamara comes in. Tamara is a coach, an educator. She is someone with a passion for fostering self-awareness and relational development, especially in professional settings. And she specializes in the Enneagram. She uses that as one of the tools to guide individuals and teams to understanding their core motivations and improve their interpersonal dynamics. And she works with the Enneagram after shifting from 10 plus years of working as an elementary school music teacher. And she now coaches professionals in helping them enhance their professional growth and effectiveness at work. And we've put a link in the chat there for Tamara's contact and info at enneagramaware.ca. Welcome, Tamara.
Thank you. I really appreciate that, how you welcome us into this space. Thank you so much for having me. And it's lovely to see all these faces, some of which I have met before in real life, which is also lovely.
That's
Um,
fantastic.
yeah, it is really great to be here and great to have all these people online.
I know,
Um,
and we hardly ever get to carve out time for ourselves. And I this is one of the things I love about mindful lunch. It's just this opportunity to bring ourselves into that stillness and awareness that is sorely needed sometimes in our taking on of real life. And most people when they enter into mindful lunch, they talk about how leaving actually leaves them feeling, when they leave, they feel a little bit more energized, they feel a little bit smoother, less rushed going into their day.
mhm.
So Tam, tell us a little bit about how you came into your work in self-awareness and relational development.
Sure. I think for me, it's been hard to pinpoint an exact starting point. I think for me, it started. I think I've always been curious about why things are the way that they are. I think that's been something that's been lifelong for me. And I actually think that self awareness work is the study of why things are the way that they are. It's the study of why I'm behaving the way that I am, the way others are behaving the way they are, how I'm being perceived. All those pieces, I think, fall into that category. So it was a very natural place for me to start reading, going to therapy, finding tools and practices and things that give me some of those answers. So my story, I mean, the interesting part of my story starts 2 years ago when I learned enough about myself to realize that I shouldn't be a teacher anymore. It was time for me to quit. So I did a lot of my own personal growth leading up to that point, but it was one moment during a therapy session that my gut said, you got to quit your job. It's time to quit. So I quit. I didn't actually have a plan for what I was going to do afterwards. I naively thought that this would be a simple transition and I would just start a company and all of that would go well. Possibly needed a little more self-awareness or less, because how do you start a company without a little bit of naivety, I think. So I had been studying the Enneagram for 10 years prior to that for my own personal growth, and knew that that was something that I wanted to dig into further because it is a hugely vast system that has many, many avenues of study. And there were two particular Enneagram coaches that I knew had the experience and the knowledge that I was looking for. And so my first thought when I quit was, I just want to study with those two people. So I did that. And then I dove into what it looks like within a workplace, because that was my biggest frustration, is I felt unseen in my workplace and I wanted to offer that to other people.
Nice. I love that. I love that story of coming into your own self-awareness, but also acknowledging that it is an ongoing process. Like
Absolutely.
you're still investigating, you're still discovering. Um,
Absolutely.
which I think is it's an important point to sort of to talk about, because I feel like it's really common to use this word self-awareness, right? I refer to it as one of those overused and under-practiced terms.
Yes. Yes.
And again, kind of coming back to this point, that a lot of people avoid real self-awareness because they're afraid of the outcomes. They're afraid of the self-reflection and what that might mean. It
Yeah.
might mean I do need to make a decision to move on and to do
Yeah.
something else. But also there is that emotional avoidance. Oftentimes the ego gets in the way. If
Yeah.
you work with teams, there's that lack of feedback that can sometimes get in the way.
Yes.
So in your experience, Tam, how do these barriers to self-awareness impact, or leadership or teams, or personal growth and
Sure.
everything else?
I completely agree with you. I actually did not use the word self-awareness in any of my literature for about a year because I was so against the popular notion of it. It felt like it was so overused and people made so many assumptions about it. I had people walking into workshops telling me, I'm really self-aware. And I thought, oh, uh-oh, what do you mean when you mean self-awareness? Because I just don't know that we're all on the same page about that. I think that we have spent so much time reflecting on our lives, or likely staying up at night in a reel of what happened during our day. And we're calling that self-awareness. We're calling that, I notice I behave this way, but more often we're noticing how others are behaving in reaction to us. And that is what we're kind of terming self-awareness. And it feels too challenging sometimes because we know our intention was good in those moments. It's hard to actually look at what we're bringing to the table. So I think you're exactly right. There are some uncomfortable and fearful things that are involved in self-awareness that just are not what we want. They just don't make us feel good. And so in a culture where we prefer feeling good and prefer quick fixes, self-awareness work is left behind.
Yeah.
Is definitely left behind. I would love to share my working definition of self-awareness, and I would love to hear anybody's, thoughts, or you can challenge it too in the chat if you want. I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. So I have two definitions. The first one I asked ChatGPT to give me. So this is what ChatGPT thinks self-awareness is. Feel free to comment. Self-awareness is the growing understanding that, oh, nope, I almost shared my own. Hold on, back that up. Here's the one from ChatGPT. Self-awareness is the ongoing ability to notice, understand, and reflect on your thoughts, emotions, behaviors, and the impact on others. So feel free to give me a thumbs up, thumbs down, whatever you think applies to that definition of self-awareness. And then I will share the one that I am currently looking at, and I'm just going to pop that into the chat for you. The current definition that I'm working on, I think, goes a little bit deeper. because our behaviors and our thoughts and our emotions are symptoms of something else. When I behave in a certain way, it's often because I'm missing something I need. When emotion is coming up for me, it's often because there is some type of misunderstanding going on, or there's something where I feel unheard or unseen. So, my current working definition of self awareness is that self awareness is the growing understanding that we have needs, because I think that's a crucial part. I think a lot of us miss that when we're hungry, we yell at people. We're learning that, right? Now we have hangry. But how long did it take us to figure out hangry, right? So there's this growing need to see that we have needs that aren't being met. And we all have different needs that aren't being met. That's our own personal journey to figure out. But then also, here's the part that I think connects to the other definition, that we need to observe what happens when we don't have what we need. So we need to see that we have needs. We have to see what happens when those aren't happening. So I think it's kind of twofold. And I think it is so much more than our behavior. It's so much more than how we're behaving in relationship to other people. Unfortunately, that ends up causing a bunch of that, which can then lead to a chance to explore, why am I doing this? Why do I feel like that person has wronged me? Why do I feel like they don't get me? So it's a chance to get curious and explore some of those pieces, but we need to know what we're looking for in order to start exploring some of those pieces.
Oh, yeah, I love this definition that you've put forward here
Thank you.
because it highlights two things that I often talk about in the work that I do. One is relationality. How
Mm,
are we in relation to the people who are around us,
yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And relationality begins with a fundamental thing called corporeality, the lived body, right? We have to
Totally. Yeah.
recognize and understand
Yes.
our lived body, the way that we express ourselves, the things that we
Yes.
feel, the things that we know, what we understand, in order to realistically and beneficially engage in our relationality or
Yeah.
relationship with other people, other lived bodies, right? And
Yes.
that can,
Yes.
whether that's a little tiny baby, to the grand CEO of the major corporation
Absolutely.
or what have you. So
I
that's really valuable.
I
Yeah.
work one-on-one with a lot of people, and one of the questions I almost always ask in an initial interview is, how good are you at recognizing what other people need? And how good are you at recognizing what you need?
Yeah.
And those two answers are almost always different.
Mhm.
I have yet to find someone that says, I always know what I need.
Mm,
Then the follow-up question to that is, how easy is it for you to ask for help?
mm,
Because
mm,
if we're talking about this in terms of self-awareness is, I know myself, sure, I'm learning some of those pieces, but the other part of self-awareness is, do I understand how that's being perceived by people outside of me?
mm.
So there is always a part of recognizing needs that includes the support, the care, the communication with the people around us. They never go all on their own or separate.
Yeah.
We are always living in community, and we are always needing to express those things outside of our bodies to the people that are around us.
Wonderful. That's such a great point. So let me kind of bring this into another, just really quickly touch on this other, I feel overused and under practiced term then, because I feel like
Sure.
it kind of leads to this, and that's emotional intelligence. I really hate that
Yeah,
word. I hate that term because because it's like, what is that? Like, are you like lots of people, just like with self-awareness, will say, hey, I'm emotionally intelligent, but what
absolutely.
exactly does that mean and how are you using it in this situation? How is that tying into your awareness of what is happening in you and around you? So
Absolutely.
Tam, what do you think about that word and how does that play into these relational interactions?
It's one of those, you are exactly right. It's an overused leadership word, and it's an overused personal development word. All of these have been, they're like keywords. If you ask ChatGPT, give me 5 things leaders should be concerned about, this one would be in there. I think the concept of emotional intelligence, from my understanding of it, is the idea that you can name feelings, you can experience feelings, and you can hold other people's feelings in addition to your own without having that create a reaction or conflict between the two of you. Or if there is conflict, you have the intelligence to move through some of those spaces. So I think emotional intelligence actually falls under the umbrella of self awareness. Maybe I said that already. I think it falls under the umbrella of self awareness because there is a need to be aware of the emotions and reactions that are coming up in your own body and in your own heart and in your own mind. So I think when people say I'm emotionally intelligent, they are likely saying, I know the names of a lot of emotions. Nobody knows all of their emotional responses. Nobody does, because you have yet to experience all of your emotional experiences. You have yet to walk into every single circumstance that you will find in your life. There will inevitably be another person that drives you crazy. There will inevitably be another person that makes you happy. There will inevitably be other emotions that are going to come up in a new circumstance or in a slightly different circumstance. So, emotional intelligence is the ability to start experiencing those emotions in a way that builds connection, in a way that builds connection first to yourself and then also to the people around you.
Wonderful. Like, I can you see why why I talk with this lady?
I love this stuff. I could talk about this stuff all day long.
I know, right? And it's really interesting to sort of know, learn, or understand all of these or these nuances
Mm,
that you don't necessarily get from
mm,
just reading a book about it or just listening to one person talk about it. Um, yes, coaching is really important. Conversations with a therapist that will use words like self-awareness is really important. But I feel like, the interesting thing is, or the crux of this lies in what do we learn and what do we practice,
mm.
right? Because these are things that and again, why I say these are overused and under practiced terms. It's like if you don't give yourself the time to practice and learn it and try it out, and then pull from that, reflect on it, and then pull from that, okay, how did this learning, how does this now tie into my new phase of learning, my
Yes.
new
Yeah.
experience of being around or with people, my new experience of dealing with this undiscovered emotion?
Yeah.
Then we're not gonna have that growing, that personal growth, that leadership growth, or even that community growth happening. And so one of the things I want to kind of switch to, Tam, is to talk about some of the practical tools
Sure.
for deepening self-awareness. Um, and I know that for me, mindful journaling, mindful storytelling, and mindful communication practices, and guys, there's a reason why I put mindful ahead of these words, because again, it's really sort of bringing a deeper level of awareness
Hmm.
into the doing of these things. So mindful journaling, mindful storytelling, and mindful communication practices play a huge role in deepening self-awareness for me. And I teach mindful journaling as a way for people to engage in reflective practices that can help us become more emotionally aware. Narrative and storytelling practices help us become more communicatively aware, right? And then I teach mindfulness and mindfulness-based stress reduction practices so that people can become physically and mentally aware and reflective and action
Mm,
oriented, right? So
mm,
that's one way of coming into this self-awareness and the nuances of emotional intelligence that you just spoke about to Tam. And
mm,
in many ways, your work with Enneagram supports that,
mhm,
yet it also stands apart.
mm.
So tell us a little bit about that and how that becomes like one of those tools that we can use for understanding or deepening self-awareness.
Sure. I first would also like to go back to this concept of what is emotional intelligence and what is self-awareness, I actually think that is a practice we all need to explore, because language means something completely different to each person that's sitting in this room and to each person that encounters it. So I actually think that there is something to be said of a practice that includes, what do I think self-awareness means? Why do I need it? How do I apply it? Because while I had my own reaction to self-awareness, and now I'm kind of dabbling with putting it back in, all of us will have our own experiences. It's likely been used against us before. I'm really self-aware, and that's why I can do whatever I want. Or, you know, in various capacities, right? So I think it's really important to acknowledge that language always has meaning. Just like you're talking about with the journaling and the storytelling, language always has meaning to us. And I think one of the most important practices is to say, why do I react when I hear emotional intelligence? Why don't I like that word? That's a perfect way to start a
Mm-hmm.
practice of, why don't I like it? How can I apply what that's intended to be initially into my life? Because there does seem to be some validity to some of these theories, certainly in leadership, but definitely in personal development work. I don't think that answered your question. I'll dive into the Enneagram.
No, no, that perfectly segues. And I just want to just highlight something that was posted in the chat here
Sure.
from one of our audience members. Um, that when someone asks how can, and I think this was in response to what you had said about emotional intelligence.
Mhm.
When someone asks, how can I help you? How do you answer that question? Is it loaded? Are you giving a loaded response, right? For
Mhm.
me, in the back of my mind, there may be an expectation that someone should know, I'm assuming this, should
Mm,
know how to help.
right.
Uh, or it could be that means that a means of support may be just showing up and caring, right? So
Mm,
it's that, again, that interpretation or
yeah.
reinterpretation of.
There are people that can sense what you need without you telling them. Not all people are like that, though. So there is a need for you to reflect, just like you're doing, and saying, I wonder why I assumed that person would know, and then have a conversation. If it's left inside, nobody knows about it.
Mhm, mhm, mhm,
I just had a couple points to add just around the practices and the practical tools. I would love if people had self-awareness and emotional intelligence practices to throw those in the chat. I obviously am a huge fan of the Enneagram. The Enneagram is on its first level a personality system, so it gives you some of the clues to your personality. So once you find your number, you can find any website, choose mine, please. And you can find any website that will give you tips. It's just like a roadmap. Honestly, the Enneagram is like fun for the first little bit. Then it gets a little harder because then you have to go into why you're doing what you're doing. But it is a perfect way to start your exploration because it's going to give you tips on where to look. That's the whole point of self-awareness, is knowing where to look. So I have done lots of self-awareness practices over my lifetime, but I'm not great at staying in a routine. And actually, I'm at a point in my self-awareness journey where the routine is actually keeping me from being a bit more spontaneous. And I'm almost locked into a journaling practice that feels too restrictive, and it's not working for me right now. So my best advice is to say, find something that works for you. So if journaling works for you, you should. If writing a list of things you love works for you, you should. If setting a timer works for you, do it. If I used to sit with a feelings wheel and I would sit and I would try them on. Anger, nope, it's not anger. Frustration, that's it. I think I'm frustrated. And I would try them on. So ask the people you know, ask people, ask ChatGPT, and find practices that work for you. The Enneagram is a perfect way to start. I'll send some resources to Patlee that you're welcome to look through. And if you have questions, you're welcome to ask me about it because it is a perfect starter to some of these questions.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. Yeah, find what works for you.
Mm-hmm.
Explore, see what's out there,
Yep.
try it on. If it works, great. If it doesn't work, great. One of the things that I love, I often use this when I teach journaling, and it's so funny that you mentioned, doing a journal or writing a list. Like I treat the two as the same thing. Making
Yes.
a list is journaling.
Yes.
In my mind, that's how I kind of define it. But one of the things that I often teach people, especially when it comes to like writing, reflecting, and things like that, I use, and you might be familiar with this, the habit feedback loop.
Mm,
And the core thing with the habit feedback loop is, what is the cue? What is your trigger that leaves you
mm,
feeling a particular way? And then
yep.
taking the time to understand, what are you craving? What's going to be the
Mm,
salve for that?
mm,
And
mm,
then once you know what that salve is going to be, then you need to respond, right? And when you respond, you will find that relief, which is the reward, right? So that
yep.
cue, craving, um, response, reward, sort of habit feedback loop.
Yep.
But it really does begin with understanding what the heck is going on,
Yeah.
and what do I need to, what would make me, like, the awareness is, what is going on? Why am I feeling this way? And naming that,
Yes.
and then
Yep.
trying to see, okay, what else is there? What is
Yes.
missing? What do I need? Kind of coming back to that,
Totally.
definition of self-awareness that you raised.
Yep.
Ask, listen, do. It sounds like a really good combination. Someone asks, how can I help you, right? It's, are you asking from that point that you are so self-aware that you know what the other person needs and is thinking? Or is it just coming from a point of caring and wishing to help? Like if it's coming from a point of caring and wishing to help, then I think the approach is always going to be a little bit different. Tam, what do you think?
I just added in the chat, I've been thinking about the golden rule versus I've heard the platinum rule. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you versus do unto others as they want you to do. Why would it be based on your need? That doesn't make any sense. It should be based on what they need, not the opposite. We can't predict what people need. I mean, sometimes we think we can, but ultimately, that lies with them as their responsibility to share with us. We can create space for them to share, but we can't assume what they are going to share with us.
Yeah, up in the chat here, and just let that kind of lead us with our audience discussion.
Mhm.
Um, but you raised another question here. Do you think self-awareness is available to all socioeconomic groups? And this is specifically referencing work in the inner city and people who are reactive. And I think this kind of highlights how important this idea for, or personal inner self-awareness leads and feeds into, or team and community, or team organizational self-awareness, which in turn feeds into our community self-awareness, in terms of that ask, listen, do, that we tend to overlook because we just assume that self-awareness is that chat GPT definition of self-awareness that you had raised earlier, Tamara.
Mhm. Mhm.
I'm curious if you have any thoughts on that. Do you think this is available to, the self-awareness is available to everyone?
I really think that
Regardless.
self-awareness will and always will be a spectrum. I think that every human that breathes has a level of self-awareness. It may not always jive with our level of self-awareness, and maybe that's where some of that conflict piece comes in. But I do not think that self-awareness is divided into different socioeconomic status. I think it has to do with your ability to recognize what you need, which happens at birth. You start crying when you need something. You interact with people right from the day you're born. And so I think as we start learning and expressing those pieces, that's when we start growing and realizing how other people are responding to us. And so sometimes that leads us into a more difficult trap of self-awareness where we assume everybody is going to behave that way. And that is our work to open back up and say, can still express my needs. I just need to know who to express those needs to so that I can build that relationship with them.
Absolutely. And I think there's also an element of needing to know what other people's needs are, and to meet that at
Mhm.
face value, not assume that we must
Yes.
satisfy those needs, but to simply know what they are, so
Yep.
that we're speaking to each other at the right levels, and not speaking apples when someone is asking for oranges, if you
Yeah.
know what I mean, kind of like Joy's example there.
Yeah. Well, and
Um,
I think that's part of building connection is allowing people space to ask. If you
mhm,
assume they never get to practice asking for what they need, it
mhm.
actually prevents your relational dynamic from growing because that communication doesn't exist.
Wonderful. Yeah, that's a very good point.
I actually think that when we talk about self-awareness practices, I actually think that those are building the muscle for crisis. So the more you can practice learning and understanding your own emotions when they're not in lizard brain, the more when the lizard brain pops up, you have a better chance of successfully navigating that. So I really think that there is something to the term practice, the idea that there's a muscle you're working out. So that I certainly, as I grew in self awareness as a teacher, I used to do choirs. So there'd be like 100 kids in a room and I'd be all by myself with them. As I started noticing, oh, I think I'm stressed. Oh, I think that kid set me off. I was able to pause. It's really just increasing that space and time, right? Between what happened and how you respond to it. So the more you practice that and the more you know that you're not a bad person for being that way, that emotions are normal and natural, and that you have certain ones that trigger more than others, the more when you're in those circumstances, you are more likely to respond in a way that doesn't escalate something further.
Be accessible to everyone. And I think this is
Yeah.
one of the reasons why I'm happy to do, you know, events like this, mindful lunch, that gets the conversation started, because,
Yes.
you know, we can be as individually, we can be as self-aware as we want to claim we are, or as emotionally intelligent as we want to claim we are. But if we aren't a society of aware individuals, if we aren't a society of emotionally intelligent individuals, however you want to define that, then
Yeah,
we are going to be prone to conflict. And if we don't know
absolutely.
how to work with conflict, if we don't know how to bring that mindful awareness to the way that we are with our relationality, then we're going to end up, you know, just continuously repeating those vicious cycles.
Yes. I always
Um,
say self-awareness doesn't exist in a vacuum.
does
We
not.
never live in a cave. None of us live in a cave. We all have to see someone sometime. So if you can't figure out how to apply your self-awareness into those spaces, you're not self-aware as you think you are.
Exactly, exactly. I just want to bring up one more point that was in the chat conversation. This one from Robin Pennerthiessen, who says the ask, listen, do, and the
Mm,
platinum rule, that those are great takeaways for her. Do what they
mm,
want you to do, because it resonates with the work that she does around inclusion, belonging, and cultural competence.
absolutely.
Self-awareness is so key to that. So she's grateful for
Absolutely.
that insight. And then SJ has added that she thinks the first step is noticing, but that it's frustrating when she knows in the moment that this is why she's doing it, but she can't stop reacting that way. So grace, you know, learning takes time and it unfolds. It's definitely a practice. Um, I, you know, this is the wonderful thing about mindful lunch. It's a treat, it's a glimpse. It's a glimpse into a conversation and learning that we can take a little bit further if we give ourselves a little bit more time for that. I'm really mindful of the time, and I really want to let folks be able to get onto their day and to ease into that quietly and gently, and, you know, feeling a little bit more energized. Before I do that, though, I just want to issue an invitation for you here to go a little bit deeper. Tamara and I are hosting a one-day online retreat called Rooted and Real, and it's part of the REU Mindfulness, a day of mindfulness and discovery. And what we'll be doing is going a lot deeper into this conversation and the learning and the practice around self-awareness and how it really resonates with the way that we work, lead, and relate to others. And we'll get a full day of calmly and in a mindful, self-discovering, and relaxing way, sort of ease into a better understanding and some more practice and some micro coaching around self-awareness, mindful awareness, and so on. So SJ has posted that information in the chat if you're interested. The cost for that workshop, which takes place on June 14th, so that's Saturday, and it's from 8:30 to 3, is $149. But we have an early bird registration going on right now where you get it for $99, I believe. And then in addition to that, for anyone in our mindful lunch, any one of our mindful lunch guests who register within the next 24 hours, we're adding complimentary lifetime access to our mindfulness practice toolkit. So I know, Tam, like this is going to be a really great opportunity to exercise some micro coaching online on this whole element of self-awareness, and get a little bit of time micro coaching with me as well when it comes to the mindfulness and the mindful element of bringing that awareness into our everyday life. How are we for time? Tam, can I invite you to lead us out today with a closing practice?
Yes, I would love to do that. So feel free to close your eyes or settle into your chair. I find most of my tension, especially on Zoom calls, is in my shoulders, my jaw, my upper back, my neck. Just let that all, breathe that all out. To close us off today, I would love for you to think about one thing that you really like about yourself. And now I would like you to find it in your body. What part of your body responded when I asked you that question? Was there resistance? Is there a part of you that lights up when you get a chance to think about what you're great at? Is there a part of you that wants to hide when you think about what you're great at? Is there a memory? Is there an emotion? I want you just to sit with that. Whatever comes up for you, just hold it gently. Don't try and change it. Let it be. Here's an idea. Ask it what it needs. What does that little part of you need? I invite you to take a deep breath into whatever part of you needs a little bit of extra breath. And now I invite you to take 3 deep breaths in through your nose, out through your mouth, in through your nose, out through your mouth, in through your nose, out through your mouth. I would love for you to open up your eyes when you're ready. And if we have a minute, I would love to hear how you are feeling at the end of our time together. If you would like to share one of the things that you were thinking about, feel free. If you would like to share a word for how you're leaving here today, that would be great. If you would just like to sit in silence and take it all in, that is also fine. I am very grateful that all of you are here. Relief, more relaxed. Thank goodness, Robin, because I think your word was rushed.
Wonderful.
Thank you so much, Patlee. Your mindful lunches are the best.
Thank you so
Can't
much.
wait for the retreat.
Yes, I'm really looking forward to that. Thank you so much, guys. And if you can, please sign up for our next Mindful Lunch event where we're actually going to be talking about building a vibrant value-based community with Jocelyn Gilbert, especially a
Mm.
vibrant and value-based community for women of color. So that's going to be a really interesting conversation. Thank you so much, everyone. We've got a few words in the chat. If you've got to go, walk. We'll be on here for another couple of minutes. If you've got anything else that you'd like to say in the chat, thank you so much for joining us.
Have a great
Bye.
day. Eat your lunch.
Good. Um,